Discord, I was messaged by a couple people to check out the Sam Seder Ethan Klein debate. Now, I have my opinions on both of these people. Obviously, they have built themselves a large following on social media. Is Sam Seder my cup of tea? Not really. Ethan Klein, he's been going through a lot. And so I just want to be very clear, because a lot of people have been saying, well, why is Ethan Klein so, I guess, standoffish against Hassan Piker or what's happening between Israel and Gaza? Well, I mean, obviously, this entire conflict that's happening between Israel and Gaza, the overall war that's happening there, is a nightmare in which there is no end in sight. And I made it very clear how I feel about this. All what this war has done, starting on October 7th, is lead down the foundations of the next war. And we're already seeing military actions happening in Libya, political instability in Syria, potential conflict with Iran, and of course, the ongoing conflict that's happening in Yemen. It looks like the world is marching towards WW3 or something close to it that will kick open the door to WW3. And I think we all just have to sit here and hold our breath as the world is going to light itself on fire. But there's other factors to take in here, okay? And that is, some time ago, streamers that don't like, or is it at viewers, to be clear here, who don't like Ethan Klein, called Child Protective Services on him and his wife. Now, this was malicious. This was abusive. And if there's one thing I believe in, especially doing this kind of business, if you got a problem with somebody, you have it with them. You keep their families away from this. You keep their families out of your mouth. You don't do that. And this was rather, look, there's a lot of people who I disagree with politically. There's even people on my own side who I might have differing of opinion with, but guess what? Calling Child Protective Services, especially on some really messed up charges, is a line that I don't support, something I don't like at all. All right. So I think it's only fair that we do pull up this entire interview segment. There's highlights of it. Now, this took place yesterday, so let's go ahead and check it out, everybody, and enjoy this video and check it out in its full entirety. So let's get to it. Let's get started with it. A little bit of highlights of Sam Seder and Ethan Klein talking about Zionism, anti-Semitism, and everything else in between. So let's get to it. Let's get started with it. Let's get ready now for this first video, shall we? Shall we? Let's do it. Let's do it. Oh, sorry about that.
And that's why he suggested that you speak to me. I don't speak for all Jews, just to be clear.
Right.
I speak for only myself as a in any form.
Well,
whatsoever.
Sam, allow me to speak for all Jews, if I may, today.
Please.
No, actually, I mean, that's a total mischaracterization, which is kind of my problem with Hassan, which we can get into if you want. We don't even have to talk about Hassan. But basically what I told him was that I was citing polling data that shows that about 70 to 80% of diaspora Jews have some kind of positive feelings towards the state of Israel. And he was disagreeing with me. And I mean, this is available by polls, readily available by Pew Research just last month, showing that. And I have, I don't know if you agree with that or not, I can pull it up, but 72% of diaspora Jews have some type of at least positive feelings about the state of Israel. I was stating that fact to him, and he was saying that I was wrong. And I said, who are you to talk about this? I did not say that I only listen to Jewish people, which is a little bit of presumptuous and a little insane.
No, I don't think that's not what I took him to say. But yeah, I mean, as long as that's irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I haven't seen that poll. I've seen ones that have said that they have a connection. They feel a connection, either strong or somewhat.
Yeah.
Which is different than positive per se.
So
regardless, I mean, I think if I don't know your upbringing at all, but I mean, certainly my upbringing, my Hebrew education was I would say 1/3 Holocaust, and I'm older, and so this was in the 70s. 1/3 into the 80s, 1/3 Holocaust, 1/3 Israel, 1/3 Hebrew, Hebrew and Jewish culture. And I certainly feel a strong connection to Israel, but I wouldn't call it positive these days.
Sure. I think what the poll attempts to is basically, if you ask Hassan or a lot of people on the left, I think an emotional attachment is the way to describe this. So it's like, if you think
I certainly have an emotional attachment, and it's not, but it's not. I wouldn't describe it as positive.
This isn't the one, is it, Dan? There's the one that.
So I want to be clear here, because people are asking, who is Ethan Klein? Well, if you remember YouTube in the early days, before he had the H3H3 show, Ethan Klein was still is, one of the first original OG YouTubers back in the day. Did a lot of funny content, especially like to do, I think you could call it the early days of also giving reactions as well, to the old react channels back in the day. And of course, he was also in this ridiculous, stupid, and I still view it to this day, this ridiculous lawsuit in which somebody was suing him for absolute BS reasons. And again, it's just stupid beyond belief. But since then, that's who Ethan Klein is. He's one of these original YouTubers. And the thing is, yes, you're going to probably be hearing Hassan's name being brought up. It's because him and Ethan also hosted a show called Leftovers. And I don't want to say it was like a liberal kind of talking point show, but if you were progressive, especially, I don't know, in the early 2020s, 2021, and you weren't part of, like, to say, Hassan's little group, you were going to get called out. So remember Force the Vote, March for Medicare for all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you remember Jenks Neffy was all on board on dismissing that kind of stuff here. So we got a couple other videos here, and I want to play this up here as well, because we got a couple more highlights.
The fact of the matter is, this conflation is dangerous for Jews. It is a fig leaf and a way of weaponizing anti-Semitism that has enabled Donald Trump to do the shit he's doing, that has enabled the slaughter of thousands upon thousands of children and women and men, for that matter. It is not keeping Israelis safe. And this type of conflation, Ethan, is what I find far more irresponsible, frankly, than the idea that he said positive any time. I mean, look, you do a show Sam, 4 hours a day. He does a show 5 or, as far as I could tell, 15 hours a day. And to focus in on that one tiny clause.
This is not one tiny clip, Sam. Well, you don't know. This is a totality of behavior.
But you wanted
and by the way, it's easy.
And
I appreciate that you can hand wave it away and say that it doesn't.
No, I'm not hand waving it away.
Well, you kind of are.
I'm saying this.
You're saying it doesn't. You're saying actually, I'm wrong for caring about it.
No, yes. In fact, I'm saying this conflation is incredibly dangerous. It is disingenuous.
I think it's dangerous right now, to ignore what's being described as dehumanizing violent language for American Jews that have nothing.
Now, there's a little bit more of this, okay? So there's a little bit more when Sam starts confronting Ethan about conflating criticism of Zionism and anti-Semitism. Now, I want to be clear here, YouTube, because I think YouTube might start snapping a little bit at me. This is, again, giving commentary of two larger content creators that are talking about the ongoing conflict that is happening in Gaza as we speak. Doctors Against Genocide, just to be clear here, just a little deviate away. Doctors Against Genocide hold DC rally for bread, not bombs in Gaza. Members of the international advocacy group Doctors Against Genocide rallied outside U.S. Congress in Washington on Wednesday to demand, excuse me, that lawmakers push for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and an end to Israel's use of starvation as a weapon of war in the besieged Palestinian enclave. Around 20 DAG members with white lab coats held up pieces of pita and chanted, "Bread, not bombs, let the children eat," during the Capitol Hill rally. The Israeli government's deliberate malnutrition, starvation attack on healthcare in Gaza has worsened and potentially pretends extermination of masses of the Gaza population. As we have covered here in the past, yes, there is horrific living standards, you want to call them that, in Gaza. Gaza's been turned into a moonscape. No clean water, no running electricity. and there are people still dying, not just from bullets or sniper shots or aerial strikes or tank rounds, but also through starvation and disease. And Trump wants to turn that into the Riviera of the Middle East. The next, I don't know, Dubai. The foundation will be built on bone and blood. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be disgusting. And forever, future generations will look at this wonderful city and wonder, what was the overall cost? And that was human lives. So I think it's only fair that we do pull up this segment here and play it.
In your family.
I'll tell you, there's some hyperbole there, but
that's putting it mildly.
I mean, he says Zionism, and I'll tell you what I think is really.
Sorry, I got to correct you. He says Zionism, and then he says, if you had positive feelings about the state of Israel at any point in your life.
I got to tell you, if you look at what's happening right now, and you have positive feelings about Israel.
He said at any point in your life, Sam. Just to be clear about what he said.
Would I have said at any point in his life, someone's life? But I just think this is such a petty, like the idea that we're going to police. Hold on, let me respond. You want me to respond this?
No,
I don't. Like I say, I don't care about this. But if you're going to force me to respond to it, what Israel is doing right now is so far beyond the idea that someone says any time in your life or not or whatnot. He's talking about Zionism, and frankly, I think it's very difficult for me to understand how someone could have positive feelings at this time. Now, you want to say in the past and what? Okay.
Yeah.
Like I say, I will grant you at any time in your life that is too broad a step. But wait, let me finish.
Yeah.
One of my criticisms of this entire conversation is that there wasn't a moderator. There really should have been one there. Somebody neutral, somebody that, could have maybe had some ties to Sam and both Ethan, because they are definitely going back and forth. But there should have been some neutral party in between. That's just my opinion. It probably would have made things a little bit more smoother. That's one major criticism that I have.
But see, you go in and you're making this about anti-Semitism by doing this hopscotch about a poll that people had positive feelings that Jewish people do, and then therefore he is anti-Semitic. And honestly, that type of conflation, I think, is so dangerous and so disingenuous. I mean, I don't want to get too passionate about this, but I will tell you something. I have had a guy who went to my bar mitzvah, my sister's bar mitzvah, my kid's bar mitzvah, sat at Passover with me 3 or 4 times, call my father and ask him if I'm anti-Semitic. Now, this is just one that is just an example, an illustration of conflating what he's clearly talking about Zionism. Was it hyperbole to say any time in life, whatever? The fact of the matter is this conflation is dangerous for Jews. It is a fig leaf and a way of weaponizing anti-Semitism that has enabled Donald Trump to do the shit he's doing, that has enabled the slaughter of thousands upon thousands of children and women and men, for that matter. It is not keeping Israelis safe. And this type of conflation, Ethan, is what I find far more irresponsible, frankly, than the idea that he said positive any time.
Now, there is something else here for context-wise, and I want to make sure I pull this up here as well. And look, I want to also pull this up here about the emotions surrounding this conflict. Any debate about what can be done, what should be done, nothing will be achieved of it. And I say this because what have we learned from that infamous interview with Tucker Carlson and Representative Thomas Massie? Well, the answer is simple. Everyone in Congress has an AIPAC babysitter. Like, there isn't going to be a call for a ceasefire. Now, I've been holding on this and thinking about whether or not I should play it or not, but there's a good chance that if I do play those videos, my channel will get a copyright strike or it will be taken down. Now, I say this not just because it causes fear or anything, but if anything, go check out Hotspot on X and you could see those videos. But there's a documentary talking about the Biden administration and how the Biden administration, it's a documentary from Israel talking about how grateful they were that the Biden administration was so supportive of Israel. That's what was going down. So all this talk about Biden working on a ceasefire or Kamala working on a ceasefire was BS. I mean, Biden literally didn't do anything. Hell, all the videos of again, go to Hotspot on X. You'll be able to see those videos in their full entirety. And I as much as I would like to play them, because that's a video series overseas, just like any other country, you probably will be facing a copyright strike. So I don't want to take that risk. I know, but hey, extra steps to protect ourselves in this day and age of madness and stupidity. But the Biden administration wasn't going to lift a single goddamn finger. And that's why we're at now, where we're at right now, especially with the Trump administration that has made it very clear that while they're doing strikes in Yemen, they're not turning any kind of lever for peace or for a ceasefire. Yes, there's been talk about ceasefires, but there was a ceasefire in Lebanon. There was a ceasefire in Syria. There's a potential maybe peace deal with Iran. Who knows what's going to happen? But October 7th, 2023, we are now, today's date is May 1st, 2025. The conflict and the bullets and the rockets are still flying high. I want to play this next video here. Apologies for that. Hold on.
2 days after October 7th. Yeah. Liars and bad faith weirdos. So here's what I'll say about Israel. Okay. Listen, this isn't the first time I've said it, and I'll say it many more times. The cabinet is run by genocidal maniacs. Okay. They're led by Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison for being a war criminal. Okay. He's made a coalition of the most radically conservative freaks that don't represent, by the way, the majority of Israelis. And they're hellbent on genocide, frankly, overtly. They've committed tons of war crimes in Gaza, including the killing of children, obviously, because Gaza is one of the most densely populated places in the world. 50% of the residents are under 18. So when you bomb a building, the chances that you're killing children is pretty much 100%. Okay? It's fucking barbaric. It's unacceptable. It's disgusting. I've seen videos, I saw videos of Palestinian dads holding his dead 5-year-old daughter. I mean,
I don't need to watch this part because it just gets a little too emotional. But I mean, so that was my take right after October 7th. And obviously that was coming off the end of me being I'm an Israeli citizen. The morning of October 7th, me and my wife were up at 3 a.m. as families were calling into news stations from their safe houses, people being burned alive with their families being murdered while on the phone with news. So coming off of that emotional shock, right? This was my reaction. Now, I don't know if there's something Zionist or pro-Israel I said there, but maybe I don't understand.
I want obviously there's gonna be a lot of ums here. Look, with this whole conflict in Gaza, I have had my conversations with people who, are educated, very familiar in the realm of politics or news, but a lot of them really aren't fully familiar with what's happening in Gaza, to be precise here, okay? And there's a lot of people who are still rather taken aback of what we are witnessing in real time. I mean, we live in a day and age where our smartphones like TikTok, X, Instagram, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, Twitch, all that good jazz. If I'm forgetting any other social media platforms, I apologize, but you have this instant video that comes to you in your back pocket, and you could watch it being played out in real time. And I think there's a lot of confusion by normal people who aren't also actively involved in politics. And yes, even those who are involved in it, and they're just rather, I wouldn't say they're forced into silence, but it's more of this is still ongoing, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. We went from one administration to another that is seeing this war escalate beyond control, beyond belief, and it's hurting all of us. And it's affecting everything, especially our daily lives, because we're seeing money go to this war. I want there to be a peace treaty, a peace deal, a ceasefire. That would be nice. But you know what? That's a dream. That's a dream that's not going to happen because of all the actions that have taken place. As the war escalates, as the fire gets out of control, it's very clear that there's only one road forward, and that is for the war to be ongoing and continuous. What people forget after October 7th is that before October 7th, Netanyahu had a lot of domestic issues happening for him. What better way to distract everyone than a wag the dog moment?
I mean, I think much of what you said was true. I'm not sure, frankly, if what we've seen Israel do in terms of Gaza is not broadly supported in Israel. I'm not seeing the body politic. I mean, I was doing a lot of interviews with Israeli reporters earlier in 2023 about the protests against what Netanyahu was doing with the judiciary. And there was a question as to whether Israelis would see that this autocracy that Netanyahu was attempting to sort of impose on the country wasn't an extension of what was happening in places like the West Bank and in Gaza in some fashion, and more so the West Bank at that time. And so I think it's hard to make an argument. And look, I would make it's not a perfect analogy as to what's happening in this country, but when you talk about the Israeli population not having a problem with what's going on in Gaza, I don't see a lot of evidence of that. There's certainly, I would imagine, a percentage of Israelis, and I know some of them who think that Israel should stop its assault there, but I don't think I don't see a lot of evidence that a year and a half later, after you said those things, that this is not the character of the vast majority of Israeli society. I mean, I'm not necessarily convinced that they are as aware. I mean, I've talked to people who have reported in the West Bank, and they said they would go from the West Bank into Israel, and the lack of awareness of what was happening in the West Bank by Israelis was shocking to them. So, I can't say if the Israeli population had a full understanding of what was happening in Gaza, that they wouldn't change their mind. But I don't see a lot of evidence of it.
So as you touched on, this was made basically before the war started. And I think that
obviously, look, here, I'm going to be clear on this. If I want to see somebody talking about the crisis in Gaza, what we're seeing here, Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate. I mean, those are two heavyweight champions. Those are two people you want to talk to. How about Bassem Youssef as well, the comedian? Remember when he was on Piers Morgan's show? Do you bloody well condemn hummus? Do you bloody well condemn ad hominem? Yes, those are people. Sam Seder, like a lot of people are saying, Sam Seder owned Ethan Klein or ripped him apart. Not necessarily. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to these conversations, which should have had a moderator too, and by the way, just my opinion, nothing was solved here. Because again, the volume does raise up, but this is just one highlight I do want to acknowledge a little bit more. I'm going to play a little bit more into it.
The unfortunate, really tragic outcome of the war is how much it's jaded and radicalized, I think, people in Israel. It's really, I think people in Israel feel like isolated. They feel like, the sentiment in Israel is basically that the world wants, the country to disappear. And obviously, like, that's a much more nuanced conversation. But the feeling there has definitely radicalized a lot since the war started. It's gotten a lot worse.
And I think, I think that gets to it to some extent. I mean, you have this wholesale slaughter. You know, I was looking up, we killed in Iraq, you know, depending on what numbers you want to look at, but you know, I think it's safe to say directly hundreds of thousands of people. But even like the number of children that we killed in Iraq, I think has been surpassed by what's happened in Gaza. And I think one of the things that I find shocking is that the sense and look, I experienced this with family members, where the sense that there's a victimization, for instance, let's say on a college campus of Jewish students, and I think that to look at what's going on, the totality of what's going on, and to perceive the victims of what's happening here to be the Israeli citizenry or Jews in this country, I think it just blows my mind. I mean,
two people can care about two things at once. Why should people?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
People who are uninvolved in the war, if they're being like victimized in a separate situation because of their Jewish identity, that's a problem, don't you think?
Oh, I do, but
you can care about two things. You can't be like, oh, these people are ridiculous for caring about anti-Semitism on college campuses because the war's happening. I mean, both we can care about two things.
100%.
And obviously, one is way worse, right? One is way worse.
But that's the point. I mean, one is way worse than what's happening in Gaza.
But who should tolerate being discriminated against based on their identity? You know what I mean? Like, of course, who wouldn't react to that?
I don't think that people are. I don't think that people are being victimized. I mean, certainly, listen, anti-Semitism is real. It was real when I was a kid. There was many times I had pennies thrown at me growing up and playing basketball. I mean, there was a lot of. I've experienced anti-Semitism, but I would put it in the context of like you're a parent, I'm a parent. If my kid is going through something very difficult, it's obviously difficult for me, but it's more difficult for them. And it's a question of prioritizing these things. You can have two thoughts in your head at the same time, but to center oneself or to perceive that one's victimization is sufficient to ignore the
I got to stop you because I don't think I don't know who's doing that.
Well, I mean, I just said like you just presented as the Israeli population feels like they're isolated and this and that.
There's two different separate conversations. There's like the American Jewry who's like, I have nothing to do with that place, and then the Israelis, right? So like when you're talking about in terms
of the way that you characterize the Israeli feeling, was that they feel isolated, et cetera, and I can understand that, but to not have the first thought of like, we are committing, like you say, genocidal acts. And if people want to call it genocide, I don't, obviously it's got to be, it's a legal term, but I think that it's colloquially speaking, at the very least, it is a genocide. And to not recognize that as the fundamental issue, the first issue, I think is blinkered. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it's a little gobsmacking to me.
Well, so I do agree with you that obviously in Israel, people, I think the problem, and just to say on a higher level, I agree with you. Like obviously the people in Israel compared to like what's on October 7th, they were victims. After everything that's happened, obviously whatever they've suffered pales in comparison to the mass destruction and like wanton death of civilians in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank too. Lots of awful stuff. That being said, I think the problem with Israel, just to try to explain what's happening there, because I do agree with you, is just like the media apparatus and the feeling that they have there. It's like there's not a lot of space emotionally and like even the information that they're consuming, I think that would allow them to have that kind of like self-realization. And like you said, a lot of Israelis don't know what's happening
There are some. I mean,
now let's stop here, okay? We're gonna pause here for a minute here because it's time to lay down some lay down some stuff that we have to address about overall what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the Middle East. You know, there was, when we look at the media, especially in 2024 during that entire election year, it was a very interesting election year. You know, it was one of which we saw the Democrats and corporate media dismiss progressives and independents and activists who were calling on the Biden-Harris administration to do a ceasefire, which thankfully shot the hotspot for getting some clips of that documentary on their X page. So check them out. X, obviously Twitter, where the administration, like I said before, wasn't going to do a thing to stop it. They weren't going to lift a finger. They weren't going to stop anything. They weren't going to do anything. They weren't going to call for a ceasefire. They weren't going to do anything at all, period. And anytime anybody went to a Democrat event or protested at a Democrat event, they were told to shut up, be silent, and the media dismissed them. All the while, then there was talk and coverage of TikTok being, what, banned out of the country, and that had to sell itself so that it could still be around, because let's face it, TikTok was one of the leading platforms showing the horrific imagery that was taking place throughout all of 2023 and 2024. There was a wave of censorship, and not to mention, you know, if you talked about this, you know, in any which way, there's a chance that your channel could get hit or your video could be taken down. It's overall Russian roulette on how you play it. But we do have to talk about this. We have to talk about how there are men, women, and children that are dying. I don't want to see anybody get hurt in this conflict, but at this point, we are at the point of no return. There's only one way forward, because no one has had the foresight of seeing that the further this conflict is escalated, the more people are going to get hurt and die. This war needs to end. I want to play another video segment. Now, it's going to be going by a little bit faster. I do apologize for that, but it's going to be going by a little bit faster. It's fast forwarded just a little bit, but let's just play this right here. I want to play this right here for all of you.
That's obviously that's way more important. So let me show you an example of something. And again, I know you don't care about the drama. To me, this isn't drama. This is one of the biggest, most influential streamers spreading something that I think is really dangerous. And you can agree or disagree, but it's a short clip. But I'll show it to you, and you tell me what you think.
This will never happen, but in a totally just world, any kind of, regardless of your background, any kind of fucking Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a fucking rabid neo-Nazi. And you shouldn't even let someone be the fucking local dog catcher as Felix was posting if they've ever exhibited any sort of like positive feelings about the state of Israel. I'm just so serious about this.
Now, by the way, he didn't misspeak. He doubled down on it yesterday. He said, no, I agree. That's what I think. Now, just to recap, he says, anyone that's had positive feelings at any point about the state of Israel is a neo-Nazi that's not fit to be a dog walker. Now, to me, that seems like extremely dangerous, dehumanizing language about what could arguably be 70% of the Jewish diaspora, and certainly probably people you know in your family.
I'll tell you, there's some hyperbole there, but
that's
I think, I mean, he says Zionism, and I'll tell you what I think is really.
Sorry, I got to correct you. He says Zionism, and then he says if you had positive feelings about the state of Israel at any point in your life.
I got to tell you, if you look at what's happening right now, and you have positive feelings about Israel,
he said at any point in your life, Sam. Just to be clear about what he said.
Would I have said at any point in his life, someone's life? But I just think this is such a petty, like the idea that we're going to police. Hold on, let me respond. You want me to respond to this? Like I say, I don't care about this, but if you're going to force me to respond to it, what Israel is doing right now is so far beyond the idea that someone says any time in your life or not or whatnot. He's talking about Zionism, and frankly, I think it's very difficult for me to understand how someone could have positive feelings at this time. Now, you want to say in the past and what? Okay,
yeah.
Like I say, I will grant you at any time in your life that is too broad a step away. Let me finish. Yeah. But see, you go in and you're making this about anti-Semitism by doing this hopscotch about a poll that people had positive feelings that Jewish people do, and then therefore he is anti-Semitic. And honestly, that type of conflation, I think, is so dangerous and so disingenuous. I mean, I don't want to get too passionate about this, but I'll tell you something. I have had a guy who went to my bar mitzvah, my sister's bar mitzvah, my kid's bar mitzvah, sat at Passover with me 3 or 4 times, call my father and ask him if I'm anti-Semitic. Now, this is just one, that is just an example, an illustration of.
Now, we did play this clip here. I want to be clear on this, but I just want to make this very clear, especially with Sam and Ethan Klein having this conversation. It's important that we separate Zionism from everything else, okay? That's what we have to do here. We have to look at the fact that right now there's a whole policy that's happening with the Israeli military going into Gaza, doing these strikes, doing these bombings. At this point, I don't know what's left in Gaza, if anything can ever be rebuilt. And if it truly is going to be rebuilt and people are going to be living there, I don't know how you could, because one day, someday, don't forget, someday, people will look back at the before times, wonder what happened. How did this happen? How did this escalate? How did things become so dangerous?
Conflating when he's clearly talking about Zionism. Was it hyperbole to say anytime in life, whatever? The fact of the matter is this conflation is dangerous for Jews. It is a fig leaf and a way of weaponizing anti-Semitism that has enabled Donald Trump to do the shit he's doing, that has enabled the slaughter of thousands upon thousands of children and women and men, for that matter. It is not keeping Israelis safe. And this type of conflation, Ethan, is what I find far more irresponsible, frankly, than the idea that he said positive any time. I mean, look, you do a show Sam, 4 hours a day. He does a show 5, or as far as I can tell, 15 hours a day. And to focus in on that one tiny clause.
This is not one tiny clip, Sam. Well, you don't know. This is a totality of behavior.
But you
and by the way, it's
easy.
And I appreciate that you can hand wave it away and say that it doesn't.
No, I'm not hand waving it away.
Well, you kind of are.
I'm saying this conflation.
You're saying actually I'm wrong for caring about it.
No, yes, in fact, I'm saying this conflation is incredibly dangerous. It is disingenuous.
I think it's dangerous
right now,
to ignore what's being described as dehumanizing violent language for American Jews. That has nothing to do with the word.
That is a complete mischaracterization of that.
It's not.
He's
not said to be a dog walker.
He never says the word Jews.
He says a neo.
Listen, how many members of Kufi have positive feelings? How many millions of members of Kufi, the Christian organization, have positive feelings for Jews? It is clearly not a function of their Judaism. It is not a function of their Judaism, and so
it describes most Jews.
No.
Yes, it does, Sam.
It describes most Christian evangelicals too.
It may do them too, but it also describes 73%
so
of Jews.
That is not anti-Semitism.
Well, I don't know. What do you call it when somebody's discriminating against the vast majority of a racial or religious group, Sam?
I'm sorry. You want to look at evangelical Jews?
I don't care about evangelical people.
Okay, but I'm talking about the way you're constructing this.
I think
you can say the same thing about Christian evangelicals too. It is not anti-Semitism. It is not. It just isn't.
Like, taking one example in isolation, which is what we've done here.
Well, you are the one who gave it to me.
Yeah, well, fundamentally, I disagree.
I'm using your example, and in that instance, that is not anti-Semitism.
Well, I disagree.
Okay, well, that's our disagreement.
All right. One other thing here too, because obviously Hassan is always being brought up. You know, yes, I know Hassan always seems to be around here all the time.
I happen to believe that she would have been better on this than Trump, but they were making an active choice to do that. I mean, it was really electoral malfeasance on her part, in my opinion. But you know, I don't know what the point of litigating this is per se. But
well, we're talking about kind of my criticisms of Hassan and how this. I don't. Well, let me show you this.
I don't care.
Yeah,
about,
I know.
Honestly, I'm like
Let me show you this. This is more.
I honestly. Like,
yeah, you don't care. I know.
I don't care.
And nobody should care about Hassan because nobody likes Hassan. No, actually, no. Apparently, he does have a lot of people supporting him. So there we go. But I want to just play just one last video segment, and I'll give my final thoughts on this segment.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I can't say to what extent, but you agree that a huge response was inevitable.
I listen. I believe a response that was inevitable by Israel, and that is because I have a much more theoretically jaded view of that country and their agenda, I think, than you. But like to expect that what they've done is inevitable.
To what? Well, Sam.
I just wonder, like, what it is that you think is in that body politic. Like, listen, like, I don't think it's inevitable, just to use an example in this country. I don't think that it's inevitable that we are going to be deporting and disappearing, immigrants in this country. I think it's possible, but my perspective on America is still too optimistic to think that's inevitable. I can't even imagine what I would think would be inevitable. And I think, like, listen, our invasion of Iraq and the complete lack of caring and the only thing that would even mitigate that is like there were no images coming out of Iraq, or very few, and certainly I was exposing them more than the American population writ large. But to perceive what we did in Iraq as inevitable
It's a different situation. That's completely, yeah. I mean, that was completely unpredictable. But we kind of touched on it. Where Hamas, and again, to what end this even matters is it doesn't ultimately. But you know, Hamas knew that they were going to bomb the fuck out of Gaza.
Listen, I would imagine Hamas thought there was going to be a response, but they wouldn't have taken hostages if they thought that they couldn't use those hostages.
Of course, they thought they could. I don't deny that.
Yeah. Of deterring Israel from entering, and that was a miscalculation on their part. They presumed that Israel was more interested in those hostages, I think, than they had assumed.
Well, and that's part of what a lot of the civil unrest in Israel is about, is that a lot of people do care about the hostages and think that the government needs to stop the war and focus on getting the hostages back and not killing innocent civilians. So that
I wonder about that last part, but
which part?
The part about the killing of innocent civilians. I mean, you know, I think that
I said that's what they're doing.
No. I'm saying I wonder if the Israeli body politic.
Oh, you think the Israelis want civilians to die?
I think the Israelis. I mean, obviously not all Israelis, but I think that enough of Israelis to maintain this government believe that Palestinians in Gaza, that their lives have no value, that they are all future enemies, that they that they all represent.
There's a lot of ums and ahs here. I know.
The threat to Israel, and I think that's. I think that's a twisted perspective.
Just so you know, there were massive demonstrations in Israel. Tens of thousands of people in a country that's relatively small. So I think characterizing like the majority of the public as wanting to kill civilians is a little sick, personally. But you know, it's. I guess you could say whatever you want.
I'm basing this on conversations with Israeli reporters that there does not seem to be in Israel a majority, at the very least, of people who are concerned about the fate of the Palestinians in Gaza. Certainly, they want hostages, and again, not all Israelis, but you know, look, I can make analogous assessments of the United States at various times about things that reflect poorly on our national body politic as well. But the proof is in the pudding.
Can I tell you something? 300,000 protesters in Tel Aviv, 200,000 in the rest of the country. That's 500,000 people out in the street protesting the government of a country that has maybe 6 million or 5 million in the.
Are you talking about the protests about the judiciary?
I'm talking about to release the hostages.
Okay, to release the hostages.
Yeah. To stop, to ceasefire. Ceasefire, Sam. That's what that means.
They were
500,000.
They were calling for a ceasefire, or they were calling for a release of the hostages.
Well, what's the point of telling Hamas to release the hostages? Yeah, of course it's a ceasefire, Sam.
Well, but Israel has, and I know I'll look this up.
Deal with this.
I don't
500,000 Israel.
Wait. Let's look this up and see how many times the Israeli government has said return of the hostages will not end.
Sam, I'm responding.
Now let's stop here, okay? Obviously, it's more of a word back and forth. Now, Sam seems to come from a jaded perspective in regards to what's happening with Israel and its policies. We know what's going to happen, the end game result. Congress is not going to call for any kind of immediate action or ceasefire. Don't expect the European Union or any other nation to go ahead and get involved. Now, I think a lot of people were, by proxy, enjoying the, I guess, parasocial community circle, seeing these two yell at each other back and forth. That's what this was. Nothing at the end of the day was solved, and no minds were changed. this all has to deal with the overall raw emotions of what people are seeing on social media. And I think we can all agree, we don't want to see communities and people being destroyed, ripped apart, suffer at the hands of weaponry and machines that could turn a person into Swiss cheese. None of us want to hear a phone call about somebody being held hostage, or no one wants to see a phone call or hear a phone call of a little girl alone in a car with all her relatives dead around her. No one wants to see a video of, first aid workers delivering food to one location and then dying on their way back. No one wants to see people die. No one wants to see that. All right. Sick people want to see that. Disturbed people want to see that. And with the fires running amok all over, the fires of war running all across the entire Middle East, no one's going to put it out. And emotions are raging up high. But the problem with people's emotions is that no one is thinking clearly. When October 7th took place, it was a perfect opportunity for Netanyahu to do what he wanted to do. And to be clear here, remember, their intelligence services were given the heads up that something was going to take place on that day. Their intelligence services were told that something was going to go down. Their intelligence services were informed that this situation was going to escalate, and no action was taken. It's hard to believe what happened. And, when you even have conservative commentators who were there, who've been to Israel before, even kind of question and call out, well, with all these watchtowers, cameras, intelligence services, drones, aerial spying, how did this happen? What took place? Right now, people have stopped asking questions and people have stopped wanting to sit at the table. And instead, it's more of, well, something's got to be done. Well, what's being done right now is completely unacceptable in human terms, completely frightening to anybody who is witnessing this terror play out right before us. There is no end game here. There is no better solution. There is no peace. Sadly, there won't be one. Congress won't allow it. Congress won't do a ceasefire. If the Biden-Harris administration won't do a ceasefire or peace, what makes you think Trump is going to do it? They already tried what? We are past 4 months. January, February, March, April. We're now entering into May, into the year of 2025, year of the snake. Terrible year, maybe. Maybe it is a terrible year. What should have been done by our leaders is actually call for a ceasefire, immediate one. But our leaders didn't do that. And those hostages that are still there, I hope they're still alive, and I hope they're not buried under rubble. But with all of Gaza becoming a moonscape, it is without a shadow of a doubt, without a debate, that yes, folks, the war is still going to go on, despite all the protests that are happening, despite everything else, because war is good for business. What really needs to be addressed, what people need to be talking about, what Eason, Sam, and everyone needs to talk about, is why our congressmen and women are profiting so much from these wars. How much money they're getting from lobby groups, not just AIPAC, but from a lot of lobby groups that are having their best interest in this war continuing on. What's the point of it? What's the point of it at the end of the day? When I look at the imagery, I get depressed. I feel like there is really no end in sight except that this is going to happen. And so I give this warning to the liberals and to the people who may imagine themselves as a hero or an activist or a leader. You say that if you were alive during certain points of history, you would help out the downtrodden. Well, it's happening now right before us. What are you doing right now? This debate, while fascinating to look at and to witness, adds nothing at the end of the day. Emotions are high, and people are still dying.